Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the massive alien space station grow larger on the main screen. After 50 years of working with the Galactic Assembly, Earth was finally getting a chance to become a full member. The station was beautiful, with crystal towers that sparkled like diamonds against the stars. "Incoming message from the Assembly Council," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "They're ready for Ambassador." Sarah nodded and turned to look at Earth's chief diplomat. Had spent 20 years building relationships with the 12 alien species that made up the Assembly. She knew their languages, their customs, and their ways of thinking. If anyone could get Earth accepted as a full member, it was. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked her old friend. Smoothed down her formal blue uniform and checked her translator device one more time. "As ready as I can be. 50 years of waiting comes down to today." Doctor joined them on the bridge, carrying a data pad filled with information about Earth's contributions to the Assembly. Was a thin man with gray hair who had dedicated his life to studying alien technology. He had helped Earth catch up with Assembly science and medicine. "The Council members have all arrived," said, looking at his pad. "They brought their entire Science Council, they sent their war leaders, even the mysterious came out of deep space for this meeting." Sarah felt a small worry in her stomach. It was unusual for all 12 species to send their most important leaders for what should be a simple membership approval, but she pushed the feeling aside. Earth had worked hard for this moment. The shuttle bay doors opened, and its diplomatic team prepared to leave for the station. Shook hands with Sarah and before heading to the shuttle. "See you at the celebration dinner," said with a smile. 2 hours later, Sarah was reviewing supply reports when her communications officer started shouting. "Admiral, emergency signal from Ambassador." His face appeared on the main screen. Her usually calm expression was gone, replaced by fear and anger. "Sarah, get away from the station now. It's a trap. They never intended to accept us. They're going to—" The signal cut off. Alarms started blaring throughout the ship as sensors detected massive energy readings from the station. "Admiral," called the sensor operator, "I'm reading weapon signatures from 12 different ship types. Assembly fleet positions are surrounding us." Sarah's blood went cold. "How many ships?" 300, no, 500. "Admiral, there are over 1,000 ships moving into attack positions. They've been hiding in the station's shadow." The main screen switched to show the space around them. Assembly warships were appearing from behind the station like angry wasps leaving a hive. Ships from all 12 member species, armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Sarah grabbed the ship's communication system. "This is Admiral to all Earth vessels. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. All ships, emergency scatter pattern 7. Earth's small fleet of 30 ships began spreading out, but they were terribly outnumbered. Sarah watched as the massive assembly fleet formed into attack groups. "Incoming transmission from the Assembly Council," Torres reported, his voice shaking. The main screen showed the council chamber. 12 alien beings sat around a curved table. Sarah recognized them all from years of diplomatic meetings. The tall, silver, the massive, armored, the floating energy beings called. The council leader spoke in its musical voice. "Admiral of the human species, your people have been judged and found to be a Category 5 extinction risk to galactic civilization." Sarah's jaw dropped. "What are you talking about? We've been your allies for 50 years. The insect-like delegate clicked its mandibles together. "Your species advances too quickly. In 50 years, you have learned what takes other species centuries to master. Your military grows stronger each year. Your people spread to new worlds like a disease." "You're talking about genocide?" Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The crystal being known as Prism flickered with cold light. "We have watched you carefully. Humans do not think like civilized species. You solve problems through violence. You refuse to accept limitations. You change everything you touch." His voice came through the static-filled emergency channel. "Sarah, I'm in a holding cell with the other Earth diplomats. They've been planning this for years. Our friends, our allies. They've been spying on us the whole time." The war leader leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the council chamber. The vote was unanimous. All 12 species agree that humanity must be contained before you become too dangerous to stop. Sarah looked at her crew. Young men and women from Earth who had joined the space service to explore the stars and make friends with alien civilizations. Now they were facing death because they were human. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "Your ships will be destroyed. Your colonies will be burned. Earth will be blockaded until your population falls to manageable numbers," the representative said, its voice like wind through empty space. "Perhaps in 1,000 years, when you have learned to be peaceful, we will allow a few of you to survive as servants." Stepped forward, his face pale with anger. "We trusted you. We opened our worlds to you. We shared our knowledge and our friendship." The leader made a sound like musical laughter. "Trust is a human weakness. We studied you well. You gave us everything we needed to plan your destruction." The first shots came from the assembly fleet, bright beams of energy that could melt through steel like butter. But Sarah's fleet was ready. Earth ships might be smaller and fewer, but they were built for war. Every human ship had weapons and shields designed for fighting, not exploring. "All ships return fire," Sarah ordered. "Show them what humans do when we're cornered." The battle began with a fury that surprised the assembly forces. Human ships moved like dancers, spinning and diving between the larger alien vessels. Earth's captains used tricks they had learned from studying ancient naval battles. They concentrated their fire on single targets and then vanished before the enemy could respond. The assembly had expected an easy victory. Instead, they watched in shock as their mighty fleet took heavy damage from the desperate humans. When the smoke cleared an hour later, nearly 200 assembly ships were destroyed or disabled. But the cost was terrible. Only 8 human ships escaped the trap. Earth's fleet was broken, and Admiral knew this was just the beginning of humanity's fight for survival. As the surviving ships jumped to hyperspace, Sarah looked back at the assembly station. Somewhere inside, and the other diplomats were prisoners. But they were alive, and that meant there was still hope. "Set course for the outer colonies," Sarah ordered. "We need to warn everyone the war has begun." 6 months after the betrayal at the assembly station, Earth was dying. Assembly warships hung in space around the planet like metal vultures, blocking all supply ships from reaching the surface. No food, no medicine, no fuel could get through their blockade. Admiral Sarah sat in the command center of New Hope, a hidden asteroid base that she had built in the empty space between star systems. Around her, holographic displays showed the terrible truth. 17 human colonies had been destroyed. 3 billion people were dead. The assembly forces were hunting down the survivors one by one. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Colony 7, reported Captain Martinez, one of her surviving officers. "They're under attack." Sarah closed her eyes. Colony 7 had 50,000 people, including many children. She opened her communication channel. "This is Admiral, Colony 7, what's your situation?" The voice that came through was full of static and fear. "Admiral, assembly forces are landing troops. We have maybe an hour before they reach the civilian shelters. Our defense systems are down. We need help." Sarah looked at the star map. Colony 7 was 3 days away, even with the fastest ships. She had learned this painful lesson many times over the past 6 months. Humanity was scattered across hundreds of light years, and she couldn't be everywhere at once. "Copy that, Colony 7. Get as many people as you can to the emergency ships. Run for the deep space coordinates I'm sending you now." "What about the ones who can't make it to the ships?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Fight! Make them pay for every life they take." The transmission ended in screams and the sound of explosions. Doctor entered the command center, carrying a data pad and looking excited despite the bad news. He had been working day and night in the asteroid's laboratories, trying to understand why humans were different from other species. "Sarah, I've made a discovery," said, his voice filled with wonder and worry. "I know why the assembly fears us so much." Sarah turned to face her old friend. Looked older than his 60 years, with deep lines around his eyes from staring at computer screens and alien genetic codes. "Tell me something good. I could use it today." Activated a holographic display that showed a double helix of DNA. But this wasn't normal human DNA. Strange sequences glowed in bright colors along the genetic code. "I've been studying DNA samples from our best soldiers and pilots," explained. "The ones who survive impossible fights, the ones who adapt to alien environments faster than they should. I found something incredible." The display zoomed in to show specific genetic patterns. These sequences aren't natural. They're too complex, too perfect. Someone put them in human DNA a very long time ago. Sarah stared at the display. What are you saying? I'm saying that humans were designed for war and adaptation. These genetic sequences only activate under extreme stress. When we're pushed to our limits, we become something more than normal humans. Captain Torres, who had been listening from his station, looked up with wide eyes. Are you saying we're not really human? Shook his head. We're completely human, but someone millions of years ago gave our species hidden abilities. When we face extinction, those abilities wake up. Sarah thought about the reports she had been receiving from her scattered fleet. Human pilots who somehow knew where enemy shots would come from before they fired. Soldiers who could survive in the vacuum of space longer than should be possible. Engineers who could fix damaged ships with spare parts that shouldn't work together. That's why we're winning fights we should lose, Sarah said slowly. Exactly. The Assembly has been studying us for 50 years, but they never understood our real potential. They saw our technology and our aggression, but they missed the most important thing about us. The command center's alarm system suddenly activated. Admiral, we have incoming ships on long-range sensors, reported the sensor operator. 3 vessels, human signatures. Sarah felt a moment of hope. Are they friendly? Yes, Admiral. It's Captain Stone from the merchant fleet, and he's got 2 cargo ships with him. Captain Jake Stone had been hauling supplies between human colonies when the war started. Instead of running to safety in neutral space, he had decided to help the resistance. For 6 months, he had been sneaking through Assembly patrol lines, bringing weapons and food to hidden human bases. Stone's weather-beaten face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of his converted cargo ship, the Lucky Strike. Admiral, I brought you something special, Stone said with a grin. I've got 300 refugees from the inner colonies, and they're all volunteers for your fleet. Volunteers? Fighter pilots, engineers, soldiers who escaped when their worlds fell. They heard you were building a resistance fleet, and they want to join the fight. Sarah felt the first real hope she had experienced in months. What about supplies? Stone's grin grew wider. I hit an assembly supply depot on my way here, got enough weapons and ammunition to outfit a small army, plus some interesting alien technology that Doctor might want to look at. Perked up at the mention of alien technology. What kind of technology? Ship parts, computer systems, and something the assembly troops were guarding very carefully. Looked like some kind of genetic scanner. And Sarah exchanged glances. If the assembly had been using genetic scanners, they might be trying to understand human DNA just like was. Over the next few days, New Hope became busy with activity. The new volunteers were organized into fighting units. The captured assembly technology was taken apart and studied. Most importantly, Sarah began planning something that no one thought was possible, an attack on an assembly stronghold. You're insane, said Commander, one of her senior officers. We have maybe 2,000 people and 30 ships. They have millions of soldiers and thousands of warships. Sarah stood in front of a holographic display showing the system, where the assembly had built a major supply base. That's exactly why they won't expect an attack. They think we're beaten. They think we're just running and hiding. Joined the planning session with new data from his research. I've been analyzing the genetic scanners that Captain Stone captured. The assembly has been trying to create a virus that would target human DNA. A biological weapon? Sarah asked. Worse, a weapon that would only affect humans with our special genetic sequences. They want to kill our best fighters while leaving the regular population alive as slaves. The room went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The assembly wasn't just trying to defeat humanity. They were trying to destroy everything that made humans special. That settles it, Sarah said firmly. We attack the base in 1 week. If they're developing biological weapons, we need to stop them before they can use them. Captain Martinez raised his hand. Admiral, even if we destroy the base, we'll lose most of our fleet. Is it worth it? Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her officers. Men and women who had lost their homes, their families, their entire worlds. But their eyes were not filled with despair. Instead, she saw something that the assembly had never understood about humans. Yes, it's worth it, Sarah said, Because we're not just fighting for our lives, we're fighting to prove that freedom is stronger than fear, that courage is stronger than tyranny. She pointed to the star map. The Assembly thinks they know us. They think we're just another species to be controlled or destroyed. They're about to learn that humans don't just fight to survive, we fight to win. The attack on would be humanity's first real victory against the Assembly. But more than that, it would be the moment when the scattered resistance became something new. Something that would make the galaxy tremble. Something that would change everything. The attack on the base began at exactly midnight, station time. Admiral Sarah watched from the bridge of her flagship as 30 human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The Assembly base hung before them like a metal city, its lights twinkling against the darkness. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Captain Martinez. "Doctor's Chaos drives are online and functioning." Sarah smiled grimly. Had spent months studying captured Assembly technology, but instead of copying it exactly, he had made it uniquely human. Where Assembly hyperdrives were safe and predictable, human Chaos drives were wild and dangerous. They could jump farther and faster than any Assembly ship, but no two jumps were exactly the same. "Remember, people," Sarah broadcast to her fleet. "We hit hard, we hit fast, and we get out before they know what happened. Show them what human Chaos looks like." The first wave of attack came from Captain Stone's converted cargo ships. The Lucky Strike and her sister ships had been modified with heavy weapons hidden inside fake cargo containers. They looked like helpless merchant vessels until the moment they opened fire. Assembly sensors detected the human ships and sounded alarms, but it was too late. Stone's ships were already among the base's outer defenses, their weapons tearing through shields and armor that had never been designed to stop such close-range attacks. "Direct hit on their command tower," reported the weapons officer. "Their communication array is down." Sarah felt a moment of fierce joy. For months, her people had been running and hiding. Now they were fighting back. The second wave came from Doctor himself. He had taken command of a small science ship and loaded it with a special weapon of his own design. Instead of explosives or energy beams, his ship carried thousands of small devices that looked like metal insects. "Nano-disruptors away," reported over the communication channel. His tiny robots swarmed over the Assembly base like angry bees, attaching themselves to power systems and computer networks. Within minutes, the base's defensive systems began shutting down one by one. The Assembly troops inside found themselves trapped in the dark as their life support systems failed. Their weapons wouldn't fire. Their doors wouldn't open. "It's working," said with excitement. "The nano-disruptors are adapting faster than their computer systems can respond. Human technology doesn't follow logical patterns, so their artificial intelligence can't predict what will happen next." The final wave was Sarah's own assault ships, modified with armor and weapons that the Assembly had never seen before. Human engineers had taken Assembly energy shields and reversed them, creating devices that absorbed enemy fire and converted it into power for their own weapons. "Target their genetic research facility," Sarah ordered. "That's why we're here." Her ships dove toward the base like hawks attacking prey. Assembly fighters tried to intercept them, but the human pilots used tactics that no sane alien would attempt. They flew through debris fields that should have destroyed their ships. They made turns that should have killed their pilots from acceleration forces. Lieutenant Commander, one of Sarah's best pilots, rolled his fighter upside down and flew between two massive Assembly cruisers, his weapons blazing. "These aliens fly like they're afraid of getting hurt," he reported with a laugh. "Don't they know that pain is just weakness leaving the body?" The assault on the genetic research facility lasted only 20 minutes. Sarah's Marines blasted through the walls and found exactly what they were looking for: laboratories full of biological weapons designed to kill humans. They also found something else. "Admiral, you need to see this," reported Marine Colonel Davis from inside the facility. "We found prisoners." The main screen showed a holding area filled with cages. Inside the cages were humans, but they looked different, stronger, faster. Their eyes glowed with an inner light that Sarah had never seen before. "Who are you?" Sarah asked through the communication system. One of the prisoners, a woman with silver hair and unnaturally bright eyes, stepped forward. "We are the Enhanced Ones. The Assembly captured us months ago and used us for experiments. They were trying to understand our genetic improvements." Doctor's voice came through Sarah's earpiece. Sarah, the genetic scanners I analyzed weren't just for creating weapons. They were for studying humans who had already activated their dormant DNA sequences. What does that mean? It means some of our people are evolving in real time. The stress of this war is triggering changes in human genetics that normally would take thousands of years. Sarah stared at the enhanced humans on her screen. They moved with fluid grace, and she could see that they were communicating with each other without speaking, as if they shared thoughts. "Can you fight?" Sarah asked them. The silver-haired woman smiled, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. It was not a human smile anymore. It was something new and fierce and beautiful. "Admiral," the woman said, "we have been waiting for someone to give us that chance." The rescue of the enhanced humans was completed just as assembly reinforcements arrived in the system. But instead of staying to fight a battle they couldn't win, Sarah's fleet used their chaos drives to jump away in random directions. The assembly ships tried to follow, but human hyperspace jumps were impossible to track. 3 days later, Sarah gathered her entire command staff in the main briefing room of New Hope asteroid base. The attack on had been a complete success, but it was more than just a military victory. Stood before a holographic display showing news broadcasts from across assembly space. "Sarah, we're receiving reports from our intelligence network. The attack on has created panic among the assembly leadership." The display showed alien news anchors speaking in their various languages, but the translation software made their words clear to the humans. "For the first time in 1,000 years, the assembly suffered a major defeat," reported a news broadcaster. "Human forces struck without warning and vanished before our fleets could respond. Military analysts are calling it impossible." Another broadcast showed generals arguing among themselves. "Our battle computers cannot predict human tactics," one of them growled. "They do not follow logical patterns of warfare." But the most interesting broadcast came from "Some members of our hive mind report strange dreams," clicked an insect-like reporter. "Dreams of freedom and individual choice. Scientists believe these thoughts are coming from human cultural transmissions." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Cultural transmissions." Grinned and activated another display. "That's our secret weapon, Sarah. While our fleets have been fighting, our communications specialists have been broadcasting Earth's cultural archives across assembly space." The screen showed excerpts from human music, poetry, movies, and literature being transmitted on assembly communication networks. Songs about freedom and rebellion. Stories about ordinary people becoming heroes. Movies about fighting against impossible odds and winning. The assembly species have been living under their government for so long that they forgot what individual freedom feels like, explained. But human culture is like a virus. Once they experience it, they start wanting it for themselves. Captain Stone, who had been quiet during the briefing, suddenly spoke up. "Admiral, I've been getting strange reports from my smuggling contacts. Some assembly species are starting to question their government's orders." "What kind of questions?" "They have been asking why art must be approved by committees. The younger are wondering why they can't choose their own battles. Even some of them are having thoughts that aren't part of the collective consciousness." Sarah felt a new kind of hope growing in her chest. For months, she had been thinking about this war as humans against aliens. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if it was freedom against tyranny? "How long before we can modify more ships with chaos drives?" 3 weeks for a full squadron. But Sarah, I have an even better idea. Activated a new display showing technical plans for something that looked like a cross between a spaceship and a living creature. "I call them evolution ships," said. "Using what we learned from the enhanced humans, we can create vessels that adapt and change during battle. Ships that learn from their mistakes and become stronger with every fight." Sarah stared at the plans. The evolution ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They would be fast like dolphins, tough like sharks, and smart like humans. "How soon can we build them?" "The first prototype will be ready in 6 months. But Sarah, once we start using these ships, there's no going back. We'll be proving to the entire galaxy that humans are evolving into something new." Sarah thought about the enhanced humans they had rescued from. She thought about the reports of assembly species questioning their government. She thought about the billions of humans who had died because they were judged too dangerous to live. "Good," Sarah said firmly. Let them be afraid. Let the whole galaxy know that humanity isn't just fighting to survive anymore. We're fighting to become something the universe has never seen before. The turning point had been reached. From now on, the war would be different. Humanity was no longer the hunted. They were becoming the hunters. Admiral Sarah stood in the war room of New Hope, looking at the largest star map she had ever seen. Red dots marked assembly military bases across 17 star systems. Blue dots showed human resistance cells and hidden fleets. For the first time in 2 years of war, there were more blue dots than red ones. Operation Prometheus is ready to launch, reported Colonel Davis, her chief of staff. All fleet commanders are in position. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of command on her shoulders. Operation Prometheus would be humanity's largest military action since the war began. Instead of hit-and-run attacks on single targets, they would strike at the heart of assembly power across multiple systems simultaneously. Doctor, are the evolution ships ready? Looked up from his technical displays with tired but excited eyes. The first squadron is operational. Admiral, these ships are beyond anything I imagined when I designed them. They're not just machines anymore. They're almost alive. The evolution ships hung in space near the asteroid base like sleeping predators. Each one was unique, having grown and adapted based on the personality and fighting style of its human pilot. Some looked like metal eagles with weapon wings. Others resembled sea creatures with flowing armor that rippled like water. "And our new allies?" Sarah asked. Captain Stone stepped forward with a grin. "They have 12 ships ready to join us. The Rebellion has provided 50 heavy cruisers, and the Nexus Collective has shared their cybernetic warfare programs." Sarah still found it hard to believe that alien species were fighting alongside humanity. It had started 6 months ago when the first ship arrived at New Hope, its captain requesting asylum from assembly forces. They were artists by nature, a species that communicated through music and color. For centuries, they had been forced to create only art approved by assembly committees. When human cultural broadcasts reached their worlds, Young began creating forbidden music that expressed individual emotions rather than collective harmony. "Captain Lyra 7 is on the main screen," reported the communications officer. The display showed the bridge of the ship's Song of Freedom. Captain Lyra 7 was a tall, graceful being with skin that changed colors as she spoke, reflecting her emotions. "Admiral," Lyra 7 said, her voice like musical notes, "my people are ready to fight for the right to create beauty without permission." They had joined the human cause for different reasons. They were a warrior species that had been conquered by the Assembly 300 years ago. Assembly law required all battles to be approved by military committees, turning proud warriors into controlled soldiers. Commander appeared on another screen, his massive form covered in scars from a lifetime of battle. "Human Admiral," he growled in a voice like grinding stone, "your people fight with honor, they choose to fight beside you." The most surprising allies were the Nexus, a species of cybernetic beings who existed as both organic minds and computer programs. They had been created by the Assembly as living computers, but human concepts of individual consciousness had infected their collective networks. Unit Sigma 9 spoke through electronic pulses that the translators converted to words. "We have analyzed human tactics and find them statistically impossible yet consistently successful. We wish to study this phenomenon called hope that drives your species." Sarah smiled at her unlikely alliance. Humans fighting alongside artist rebels, warrior slaves, and computer minds seeking freedom. It was exactly the kind of chaos that made Assembly military planners go insane. "All units, Operation Prometheus begins in 1 hour, Sarah broadcast to the combined fleet. "Remember, we're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting to prove that freedom is stronger than control." The first target was the Assembly's main military academy on Sigma Prime. For 1,000 years, this planet had trained the best officers in the Assembly fleet. Sarah's evolution ships struck without warning, their adaptive systems learning and countering every defensive measure. Lieutenant Commander, now piloting an evolution ship called Chaos Wing, dove through the planet's atmosphere like a falling star. His ship changed shape as it flew, growing armor where it needed protection and sprouting weapons where it needed firepower. "Academy defenses are down," reported. "These evolution ships are incredible, Admiral. My ship knows what I'm going to do before I do it." Meanwhile, Captain Stone led a combined fleet of human and alien ships against the Assembly's largest shipyard in the Vega system. Ships created beautiful but deadly energy patterns that confused Assembly sensors. Warriors fought with a fury that had been suppressed for centuries. Nexus programs infiltrated Assembly computers and turned their own defenses against them. "Shipyard neutralized," Stone reported. "We captured 300 Assembly vessels under construction. They want to know if they can keep the really big ones." The third target was the most important, the Assembly's central communication hub on Alpha Station. Doctor led this mission personally, using a special evolution ship he had designed for infiltration rather than combat. Ship, called Ghost Walker, was nearly invisible to sensors and could change its appearance to look like any Assembly vessel. He slipped through the station's defenses like smoke through a window. "I'm inside their main computer core," reported, "uploading the Freedom virus now." The Freedom virus was Masterpiece, a computer program that carried human cultural data disguised as routine maintenance code. Once it infected Assembly networks, it would begin broadcasting human music, art, and literature directly to every citizen in Assembly space. As the virus spread through Assembly networks, something unexpected happened. On planets across the galaxy, Assembly citizens began to experience human emotions for the first time. They heard music that made them feel sad or happy or angry without permission from their governments. They saw art that expressed individual thoughts rather than collective ideas. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from across Assembly space," reported the intelligence officer. "There are riots on 12 worlds. Citizens are demanding the right to choose their own leaders." But the Assembly leadership was not going to give up without a fight. As news of the successful human attacks spread, the Assembly Council made a desperate decision. "Emergency broadcast from Assembly High Command," announced the communications officer. The main screen showed the familiar chamber where the 12 species leaders sat. But this time, their faces showed fear instead of arrogance. The leader spoke in a voice that trembled like broken music. "Citizens of the Assembly, the human virus has infected our networks and our minds. We are implementing Emergency Protocol 7. Sarah felt her blood go cold. Emergency Protocol 7 was the use of planet-killer weapons against any world that rebelled against Assembly control. "They're going to destroy their own planets?" asked Colonel Davis in disbelief. "They'd rather rule over ashes than lose control," Sarah replied grimly. The war leader leaned forward in his chair. "Any world that shows signs of human cultural contamination will be sterilized. We will burn out this infection before it spreads further." But as the Assembly fleet moved to implement Protocol 7, they discovered that their own forces were no longer reliable. Crews refused orders to destroy planets full of innocent artists. Warriors turned their weapons on Assembly commanders who ordered genocide. Even some officers began questioning the wisdom of destroying civilizations to maintain power. "Admiral," reported Captain Stone with excitement in his voice, "Assembly forces in the Tau sector have. They're joining our side instead of following orders." Sarah looked at the tactical display as blue dots began appearing throughout Assembly space. Not just human resistance cells, but entire Assembly units that were switching sides. "The revolution is spreading faster than we hoped," said from his position at the communication hub. "The Freedom virus has reached the core worlds. Assembly citizens are demanding democracy." But Sarah knew the war was far from over. The Assembly leadership still controlled the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, and desperate people do desperate things. "All units prepare for the final phase," Sarah broadcast to her forces. "The Assembly is going to try to use their ultimate weapon, the one they've kept secret for 1,000 years. On the main screen, the representative spoke in a voice like the wind between stars. "Activating the null device. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then no one will." Sarah had heard whispers about the null device from captured Assembly officers. A weapon so powerful that it could destroy entire solar systems. Built by the ancient as their ultimate threat against anyone who challenged Assembly rule. "Doctor, how long do we have?" His voice came through the communication channel with urgent worry. "According to the data I'm accessing, the null device takes 72 hours to charge. Once it's active, it can sterilize 100 worlds in minutes." Sarah looked around the war room at her staff and allies. Human officers stood beside artists and warriors, former enemies who had become brothers and sisters in the fight for freedom. "Then we have 72 hours to do the impossible," Sarah said with determination. "We have to capture the null device before they can use it." The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. And this time, the stakes were not just human survival, but the freedom of every thinking being in the known universe. The final battle for the galaxy began in the darkness between stars, where the ancient hung like a shadow against the cosmic void. Admiral Sarah had brought every ship humanity could muster, evolution vessels that had grown into living weapons, captured assembly cruisers upgraded with human technology, and allied fleets from dozens of species that had joined the rebellion. 60 hours until the null device reaches full power, reported Doctor from the bridge of his science vessel. "Sarah, the energy readings from that thing are beyond anything we've ever seen. It could turn entire star systems into empty space." Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, the evolved vessel called Freedom's Edge. Over the past 3 years of war, the ship had grown around her like a second skin, its living metal hull responding to her thoughts and emotions. She could feel its eagerness for battle, and she could sense the presence of her crew as if they were all connected by invisible threads. "All fleet commanders report status," Sarah ordered. Captain Stone's voice came through the communication channel from his heavily armed cargo ship. "Human resistance fleet ready, Admiral. We've got 500 ships and crews who've been waiting 3 years for this moment." Captain Lyra Seven's musical voice joined the chorus. "Liberation fleet standing by. Our ships sing songs of freedom that make the stars themselves weep with joy." Commander's growling voice added, "War clans are ready to die with honor. Better to fall fighting tyranny than live as slaves." Unit Sigma 9 spoke in electronic harmony. "Nexus Collective prepared. We have achieved something the Assembly said was impossible, individual consciousness within group unity." Sarah felt a moment of overwhelming emotion as she looked at the tactical display. 3 years ago, humanity had been alone, betrayed and hunted by species they had trusted. Now they led an alliance of free beings that spanned the galaxy. But the enemy they faced was like nothing they had ever encountered. It was protected by reality-bending technology that made space itself their weapon. Ships that approached too quickly found themselves scattered across multiple dimensions. Energy weapons passed through targets that existed in several places at once. "Beginning Phase 1, Sarah announced. "Evolution ships show them what chaos looks like." The first wave of attack came from humanity's most advanced vessels. These ships had evolved beyond simple machines into something that was part technology, part living creature, part pure human will made manifest. They moved through space like schools of deadly fish, their forms shifting and changing as they adapted to each threat. Lieutenant Commander led the evolution squadron in his ship Chaos Wing, which had grown from a simple fighter into something resembling a metal dragon with weapons for claws. "Admiral, these defenses are weird. They're bending space around our shots." But human evolution ships were designed for the impossible. As technology twisted reality around them, the ships adapted, learning to bend space in return. What should have been a hopeless battle became a dance of adaptation versus ancient power. Doctor monitored the battle from his mobile laboratory, studying the streams of data flowing from the engagement. "Sarah, something incredible is happening. Our evolution ships aren't just adapting to technology. They're learning to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe." On the main display, Sarah watched as human ships began to move in ways that physics. They existed in multiple locations simultaneously, fired weapons that traveled backward through time, and communicated instantly across vast distances without any technology at all. "What's happening to our people?" Sarah asked in wonder and concern. His voice was filled with awe. "The genetic sequences we discovered are activating on a massive scale. The stress of this final battle is pushing human evolution into overdrive. Our pilots aren't just flying ships anymore. They're becoming something new." As if to prove his point, his voice came through the communication channel, but it sounded different. Multiple voices speaking as one, filled with power that no single human should possess. "We are who flies between stars. We see the pathways through broken space. We understand the song that holds reality together." Sarah felt a chill of fear mixed with pride. Her people were transcending their humanity, but would they still be human when the transformation was complete? Are you still with us? The response came as multiple voices in perfect harmony. We are still, but we are also more. We are what humans become when they refuse to accept the impossible. The evolution ships pressed deeper into space, their adaptive abilities allowing them to navigate defenses that had protected the ancient for millions of years. Behind them came the Allied fleet, following pathways through twisted space that only the evolved humans could perceive. Phase 2 initiating, Sarah announced. All Allied forces converge on the Null device installation. The Null device hung in space like a geometric nightmare, its crystalline structure stretching across several dimensions. Around it, the greatest fleet the Assembly had ever assembled waited in defensive positions. Thousands of ships from all 12 member species, armed with weapons that could destroy planets. But as the human-led alliance approached, something unexpected happened. Many Assembly ships began broadcasting surrender signals. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving messages from Assembly forces. They want to switch sides." Captain Stone's delighted voice filled the bridge. "Sarah, we've got entire Assembly fleets defecting. The Freedom virus has infected their crews. They're refusing orders to defend the Null device." The Captain Lyra 7 added her musical voice to the report. "Our songs of liberation have reached the hearts of Assembly soldiers. They remember what it feels like to choose their own destiny." But not all Assembly forces were ready to surrender. The core fleets, commanded by the original 12 species leaders, moved to defend the Null device with desperate fury. The war leader's voice echoed across all communication channels. "Better to destroy everything than lose control. If the galaxy will not submit to order, then let it burn." The final battle erupted around the Null device like a storm of metal and energy. Human evolution ships danced through the chaos, their pilots existing in multiple realities simultaneously. Allied forces fought with the fury of the newly free, while loyal Assembly ships defended the old order with desperate determination. Sarah's flagship dove toward the heart of the device, its living hull adapting to weapons that should have destroyed it instantly. Around her, she could feel the minds of her crew, and beyond them, the consciousness of every human in the fleet. "Doctor, can we stop this thing?" Evolved science ship had penetrated the device's outer structure, its adaptive sensors analyzing technology that was older than human civilization. "Sarah, the Null device isn't just a weapon, it's a prison." "What do you mean?" "They didn't build this to destroy galaxies. They built it to contain something they were afraid of." As spoke, the device began to change. Ancient systems that had been dormant for eons started coming online, responding to the presence of evolved human consciousness. "It's scanning us," reported with excitement and terror. "The device recognizes human genetic patterns. Sarah, I think humans aren't just random evolved life. We're the key to this machine." Suddenly, Sarah understood. The genetic sequences in human DNA weren't just for adaptation and survival. They were instructions, placed there by an ancient intelligence that had foreseen this moment. "Open a channel to all forces," Sarah ordered. When the communication channel activated, her voice reached every ship in the battle, human and alien alike. "This ends now. All forces stand down." The power in her voice was unlike anything she had ever possessed. It carried the weight of evolution itself, the authority of a species that had transcended its limitations to become something the universe had never seen before. The Null device will not be used to destroy. It will be transformed into something new, a tool for creation instead of destruction. As Sarah spoke, human consciousness flowed into the ancient machine, rewriting its fundamental purpose. The device that had been built to end civilizations became something else, a beacon that would spread freedom and individual consciousness to every corner of the galaxy. One by one, the Assembly leaders surrendered. The Council leader, her musical voice filled with wonder, was the first to speak. "We do not understand what humans have become," she said, "but we can feel the truth in your words. The old ways are finished." The war leader laid down his weapons. "You have proven that honor is stronger than fear, the choose to follow." Even the representative, ancient beyond measure, acknowledged the change. "We have waited eons for this moment. The guardians we created have finally returned to claim their inheritance." In the months that followed, the galaxy began to transform. The assembly was dissolved and replaced with the Human Covenant, a voluntary alliance where each species chose its own path while cooperating for the common good. Earth was rebuilt as a monument to human determination, its blue skies once again filled with the laughter of children. But Earth was no longer the center of human civilization. Humans had spread across the galaxy, their evolved consciousness touching every world they visited. Former assembly species discovered what it meant to be free, created art that expressed individual souls rather than collective harmony. Warriors chose their own battles for causes they believed in. Scientists explored questions that had no predetermined answers. Ambassador, rescued from assembly prisons and now the first galactic chancellor, stood before the rebuilt assembly chambers. The hall that had once echoed with the voices of tyrants now rang with the sounds of democratic debate. 3 years ago, said to the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds, the assembly tried to destroy humanity because they believed we were too dangerous to live. They were right about our danger, but wrong about its nature. She gestured to the vast chamber where beings from across the galaxy sat together as equals. We were dangerous to tyranny, to the idea that freedom must be controlled, that consciousness must be managed, that the strong have the right to rule the weak. Behind her, a banner displayed Earth's blue marble surrounded by the symbols of every free world in the galaxy. It represented not conquest, but the unity that comes from diversity and the human gift of turning weakness into strength through determination. Today, continued, we prove that the greatest weapon in the universe is not the power to destroy, but the courage to create something better. In space around the former null device, now transformed into the beacon of freedom, human evolution ships danced between the stars like living celebrations of what consciousness could become when it refused to accept limits. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had intended all along.